back to my channel. I'm so glad you stopped by today because today we are going to be doing a creature that I've been wanting to do for quite a while, and recently I found the perfect fabric to do it. It's a really cool textured scaly fabric and I'm going to be using it to make an alligator. So let's get started. Okay, so I think I'm going to start on my clay head first. For this, I needed quite a large piece of tinfoil, except I also needed it to be kind of flat as well. And then I also glued it to my glass container so it wouldn't slide around, just because it was so large I was afraid it'd slide off. Once I had that in place, I'm going to start taking strips of clay and completely covering this up. So I'm just going to wrap my strips around this piece of tinfoil and then blend everything together. One thing that was a little bit difficult with this piece is while I was working on it, I kept mentally jumping back and forth between wanting to do a crocodile or an alligator. I eventually settled on alligator, obviously. I think the main reason I wanted to go with an alligator versus a crocodile was because I liked the round features, and I thought it'd be just a little bit easier to start off with. And then maybe later on we could do a crocodile, just a different color or something, because their features are a little bit more complex along with how their teeth are lined up. Okay, so I got my thing completely covered in clay, everything is blended together, and now I need to add some eyes. So I'm going to build up some clay on the top of the head where I want the eyes to go, just to have a place to put them, and then I'm going to be using some resined eyes that I made earlier. So I'm going to push my eyes into place, and then I'm going to start building up clay around them to make the eyelids, and then we can also break the eyelids up into scales. Now for this piece, I do want to go for a lot of realistic features and stuff, but we're not going for realistic colors, so I figured adjusting the details here and there to go along with it would be fun as well. So I know the eyes are a little bit too large and some of the features are a little bit more exaggerated than they should be. So I'm going to add all the detail and texture around the eyes just to get them all nice and done, and then I'm going to add some more clay to the end of the snout, mainly trying to make it go a bit more upwards to have a bit of a curve to the face. And then once I have that blended into the rest of the face, I like the shape of it, I'm going to add some nostrils, and then I'm also going to start adjusting the shape of the head a bit. So I might add clay, I might take clay away, and just keep adjusting it until I like the shape of the head. Normally with the shape of the head, I already know what I want it to look like before adding some features, but with this piece, once I added the features, I realized I needed to adjust for them just a little bit. And then after that, I'm going to take a large, thick strip of clay, and this is going to be the upper lip. So I'm going to lay this out, make sure to get it nice and even on both sides, and it's going to have a bit of a wave to it as well, and then we're just going to push it in and blend it upwards. I'm going to start roughing up the texture of the top of the head and just kind of getting that all done with, and then we're going to move to the bottom portion of the head and start adding some teeth. So I'm going to take some balls of clay and roll them out into some cones, and then we're going to lay them out where we want the teeth to go. And then I'm going to use my tools to kind of blend everything together and just kind of refine the shape of them a bit. Lastly, I'll add a little bit more texture here and there on the bottom portion of the head, and I'll clean up the edge around the base of the head. Then we can put our clay head in the oven at 275 Fahrenheit for probably closer to 55 minutes than the 45 minutes, just because this is a pretty large piece of clay, and I want to make sure it bakes all the way through. Okay, so now we're going to start on our alligator's feet. So I have a wireframe set up for all of the feet. They're all going to have 5 digits. The back feet are going to be only slightly different than the front. The front feet are nice and even, and then the back feet kind of have a curved bend to them. So the first step with my feet is normally the same. I'm going to take a lump of clay and cover up the portion where all the wires are combined. We're going to get that completely covered, and then we're going to add some claws to the ends of our wires. So I'm just going to add a little ball of clay and then kind of use my fingers to pinch it into a claw shape. We're going to pre-bake after this at 275 Fahrenheit for probably about 25 minutes, and then once everything is out of the oven and is cooled, we can start working on more of the bottoms of the feet. Now, I'm going to be doing the bottoms of the feet a little bit differently than I normally do with my feet, mainly because these are going to be webbed. So what we're going to do is we're going to roll out a sheet of clay, and we're going to take our wireframe and lay it on top of that. Then we're going to kind of trace around it to get the basic shape. We're going to cut that out, and then we can use that and push it onto the wireframe and cover up our wires. Once I have the clay in place, I'm going to blend and adjust the shape of it to make sure that you can kind of see the individual toes as well. After I laid out the bottoms of the feet, I decided to do another pre-bake at 275 Fahrenheit for another 25 minutes. Now you're welcome to skip this if you don't want to save your progress. You can just move on to doing the tops of the feet. But I didn't want to worry about bumping anything, so I just decided to do a pre-bake. And then once my feet are out of the oven, again, I can start working on the tops of the feet. For the tops of the feet, they're going to be done pretty much the same as the bottom. We're going to lay out a sheet of clay, trace our foot, and then we're going to take that piece of clay and we're going to lay it on top of the foot. After we have our layer of clay laid down, we're going to take our fingers and kind of blend all of the pieces together. So all the edges and stuff are going to blend together and just try and smooth everything out. So that's the basic layout of the foot. Now what we need to do is we need to start adding a scaling texture to the top. So we're going to take our tools and we're going to start adding some lines here and there to lay out the shape of the scales. Now the way I'm going to be laying out the scales is where the toes are, I'm going to be making larger scales. And then in between that where the webbing would be, I'm just going to add a texture to it. So I'm going to get that done on all 4 feet, and then we can put them all in the oven again for one final bake, 275 Fahrenheit. This time around we're going to do about 45 minutes. And then once we have all of our clay pieces out of the oven and have cooled to touch, we can start on the painting. Now I know I haven't shown you guys the fabric yet other than the little sneak peeks here at the beginning. So basically the fabric that we're going to use has a black scaling with a blue kind of highlight in between the scales. So what I'm going to be doing with my clay pieces is I'm going to be primering them a nice bright blue. So I'm going to get everything completely painted blue. I'm going to go around the eyes and avoid getting paint on my resined eyes so I don't have to peel it off. And I'm just going to get everything completely done and dried. And then after our blue paint has dried, we can go over and start darkening features or even lightening them up if we want to. And then what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to take my large paintbrush. I'm going to be using black paint. I'm only going to add a little bit to the brush, and then we're going to brush over lightly the whole face. This is going to catch the black paint on the more raised up portion and leave the kind of sunken in portions blue. So I'm just going to go over the face until I like how dark it gets, and then I'm going to let it dry for a bit before we paint the teeth. For the teeth, I'm going to be using a white. If you want to make them look more realistic, you can add a hint of yellow or brown to the paint to make them look a bit more dingy and more natural. And then lastly, after we get the teeth done, I'm going to start adding highlights to the rest of the face, just more of the raised up scales kind of around the eyes and the nose. And then for the feet, they're going to be done basically the same way as the face. We're going to primer them blue, the same color. We're going to let that dry, and then we're going to go over that with a black, making sure to only paint the portion that's more raised up. And then for the claws, I want them to stand out just a little bit, but not too much. So I'm going to use a darker gray for that. So I'm just going to paint all the claws, and then after that, I'm just going to add a little bit of a highlight to the scales on the tops of the feet. And then once we have everything painted, everything's dried, I'm going to mix up some resin and paint over all my clay pieces to lock in and protect the paint. So those are going to have to sit overnight and dry, so now we can start on the sewing. Okay, so for the sewing, this is the pattern that I decided to make. I made a very simple one to where everything is just going to have a top and a bottom, and then the body is going to have sides, but I didn't make pattern pieces for that. I'm just going to be using a strip of fabric, and I'm going to taper off the end to go with the length of the tail. So the top of the body is going to be made out of my fake leather that I had the scaling effect and everything on, and then the rest of the body is going to be a plush black. So for the main body, we have a top and a bottom, and then we have strips that are going to go down the sides. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to take those strips and we're going to sew them down the sides of one of the pieces. So I'm going to start with the top piece first, and then after we have those in place, we can take the belly and we can sew everything together and close it up. Now after I got the sewing done for the body, I realized since I'm going to be using a wire frame for this, it's going to be a lot easier to put everything together if the belly is more open. So I'm just going to cut down the belly right down the middle to leave an opening, and then I'm going to flip everything right side out. And so that's basically how our body looks, and then I'm going to start sewing the legs. So for the legs, the tops are going to be the fake leather, and then the bottoms are going to be the plush black. And we're going to basically sandwich those together and sew down just the fronts for now. And we're going to do this to the front legs and the back legs. And then once all of our clay pieces have finished curing overnight, we can start putting our alligator together. So what I'm going to be doing first is I made a very simple wire frame, and I'm going to be adding this to the body. So I'm going to slide it inside of the body that we made. For the leg wires, I did have to cut tiny little holes for them to run through the body. Also, before I added the wire to the body, I did stuff the tail. Once we have the body fabric over the wire frame, we're now going to take our clay head and we're going to glue it to the wire for the neck, and then we can take the fabric for the neck and glue it around the base of the head. We're going to let that dry a little bit, and then we can stuff the body and close everything up. Now the last thing that we have to do is add our legs. So I'm going to take the fabric pieces for the legs and I'm going to be sewing them into place. So the plush black portion of the leg, the under portion, is going to go under the wire, and then we're going to take our fake leather over the wire and just kind of close that wire up inside of the leg. We're going to do this to the front and back legs. Once we have those all into place, we're going to take the wire for the leg, make sure it's the correct length. Normally I add a few inches here and there to my wire frame just in case, and then I can cut the excess wire off if I need to. So I'm going to adjust that, and then I'm going to take our clay legs and start adding them to the wire frame. So I'm going to take a 20 gauge wire and start wrapping them onto the frame. And then once we have those into place, we can take the fabric for the legs and start gluing them around the wrists and the ankles. We're going to let that dry a little bit, and then we just need to stuff and close up the backs of our legs. Okay guys, and that's how I made an alligator. I had so much fun with this project, and I can't wait to use this fabric on something else. Maybe we can do a fantasy type creature with it, I'm not sure. I do know the fabric comes in a bunch of different colors. If I can find a link for it, I'll leave it down below, but I do know that all my fabric links are to the same seller that this comes from, so somewhere in their shop they'll probably have it. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure to like, subscribe, do all that fun stuff, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!